thank you so much for joining our team at the Kenyan Wall Street today. So tell us a little bit about VestedWorld.
VestedWorld is an early-stage fund focused on East and West Africa. We invest in companies in agribusiness, consumer, and enabling technology. And the foundation of our thesis is that Africa can become the next East Asia. We saw a significant amount of growth in East Asia and really understood that agriculture and consumer were really critical part of that growth story, both in terms of job creation, but also contribution to GDP. So our view is in Africa will probably follow a similar growth path than to reinvent the wheel. And so we invest in those sectors. We also have a commitment to investing in African founders, and we invest with a gender lens. One of the things that I think is really important about VestedWorld is we are founded and now managed by Africans, and we have a team that's based in Africa. We have over 30 portfolio companies in East and West Africa, and we primarily invest in Nigeria, Ghana, and Kenya, as well as additional East African markets.
Okay, now many of the Kaufman Fellows who are here in town this week, many of them, this is either their first time to Africa or first time to Kenya. What do you hope that they get out of this and take back home?
I've lived and worked on the continent for the last 15 years, and I think all of that time has been exploring different markets, probably been to 20 plus countries at this point, and each country is so special and particular. There are different cultural nuances, histories, geography, elements that really impact the economy, the culture, etc. So I think part of it is just, of course, getting to know people from across the continent. And then second is really getting to know as much as I can about Kenya and the country that we're in. So meeting founders from here, hearing from investors who invest here, and also just going out and experiencing a bit. I know some people are going out off the beaten track a bit, and I think that's a wonderful thing. And taking back from Africa the stories of the continent, really helping with the storytelling piece of what we do here.
Okay. Now, what are you hoping to get out of your time here at the Kaufman Fellows Summit?
Yeah, well, I just started my fellowship, so I think for me it's mostly about connecting with other fellows, other investors, and particularly connecting with folks in other emerging markets where we can really learn from, who are perhaps further ahead of us from an ecosystem development and venture capital development perspective. And then, of course, connecting with my classmates in my forum, which is the small group that sits within Kaufman. We just met each other in June, so it feels like a very new journey in a lot of ways. But I'd say the most important thing is really connecting with people and learning from them and their experience.
Okay, now just a few personal questions for you, if you don't mind.
Ready.
When you were first starting your career, what did you spend your first paycheck on?
Oh, this is such a good one. Now, career is a challenging one. I first started working in my dad's black bookstore in the U.S. when I was probably 7 years old. And I started a bookmark company because we thought we could make bookmarks to sell in the bookstore out of cardboard and nail polish. So I think that's probably some of what we spent that first quote-unquote paycheck. But if I think back to when I started at McKinsey 16 years ago, it was probably on, my father cut me off of my cell phone plan immediately when I started and told him I got a phone for work. So I'm sure a portion of that went to paying bills, including my cell phone plan bill, and probably some business clothes to show up appropriately at work.
I'm with you. Mine went to a suit when I first started. But if I were to open up your Spotify or Apple Music, what genres am I going to see there?
You'll see a mix of, finance podcasts, unfortunately. I listen to them in 2x, so at least I get through the learnings really quickly. Focus music, so both brown noise, and there's this amazing Cora Focus playlist. And there's a couple of Afrobeats. There's a couple of Afrobeats playlists in there. There's one that's called We Are Everywhere, and it's sort of like a Black diaspora playlist that includes Afrobeats and R&B, and then a few other sort of songs. And then you might also find, depending on how active my nephews and niece are, some Disney, like lots and lots of Disney songs as well.
Okay. Now, what's your favorite meal?
Oh, these are like the hardest questions. Okay, so meal of the day, I would say is breakfast. Because I don't always have lunch, and so it's helpful to get a good foundation. And plantain technically is a full, carb meal. It's like you usually eat enough that it is your full caloric content for a meal. So I would say plantain, and specifically fried plantain, is my favorite meal.
What is the craziest thing you've ever invested in or spent money on?
These are some hard questions. Let me think. The craziest thing I've ever spent money or invested.
And this could be an investment as well, where everyone else in your industry is looking at you saying, that was a crazy decision. Why would you do that?
Yeah. I'll say two, because I'm like, this is a very challenging question, but a very good one. I did something called canyoneering probably 5 years ago, where you jump off cliffs into a water body. And I think that was pretty crazy. You have a helmet, but it's, the last jump, you do progressively higher and higher jumps, and then the guide decides if you can do the last one, which was about 30 meters. So I jumped 30 meters into sort of a water body. I think that was probably the craziest thing I've spent money on. And then investing, it was actually my first deal at VestedWorld. We invested into Shuttlers, and they're a mobility company in Lagos, moving people, of course, through the traffic, but through a shared bus, which is tech-enabled. And I think the important part of it is that they started out first female-founded company in a male-dominated industry, and spent 5 years bootstrapping before they raised their first outside round, which we invested and led 2 years ago. We got feedback that they were not venture scalable, and that's why a number of people were passing. I think we saw this company had gotten to a pretty massive scale and had the right unit economics and really understood what was to come. Since then, they've scaled massively. So from the time of our investment to their Series A round earlier this year, they scaled the number of routes by 26 times and have continued to scale from there. They're currently moving 9,000 commuters in Lagos on a daily basis, which means morning and night.
Wow.
And 40% of those consumers actually used to be driving themselves to and from work and have now fully moved to Shuttlers as their preferred mode of transportation. I think it was potentially seen as crazy. It took some time to close that initial round. And part of it was this question of is it venture scalable? I think they've really proved that out now and are just continuing to do that in Nigeria and hopefully someday in other markets as well.
Okay, thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, thank you as well.
And can we